Acadiana's Morning News, as we now have Winging It Wednesday. Our panelists joining us in studio, Stafford Barnett, Warren Cottle. Good morning, everyone. And Carol Ross. Hi.
Good morning.
All right, so it is the middle of the week already. Early voting is underway already. And where's the month and the time going? Derek, I don't know where it's going.
I have no clue. And as far as early voting goes, we don't know where the voters are going. Maybe they're not making it to the precincts. Maybe they get detained. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they get stopped at Burger King or something. I'm not sure. But
it's like why do people not vote? Yeah, but anyway.
That's it.
All right. So topic number one, sir.
Well, the one major topic ever since Sunday was the tragic shooting in Sutherland Springs, Texas, and we've been following that from a news standpoint, but from a human standpoint, how tragic! 26 people killed within that tiny church. From what I heard, the governor of Texas say there's about 500 people in the community, and over 50 of them were either killed or injured. That touches every family in the community. What do we do in the wake of these mass shootings? Is there a way to stop it? This is something I've asked myself. What can we as people do following these shootings? Let's start with Stafford.
My thoughts go out to the people who were murdered and the families and the community. It's a very tragic situation. It's one that's become kind of all too familiar for us. Look, I've said before and I'll say it again. I'm a pro Second Amendment guy. I shoot, I hunt. It's the stuff that I enjoy. But just from a common sense perspective, you have to sit back and go, this guy shouldn't have had weapons. He should have been reported. The ball was dropped there, and that doesn't change the fact that even if he was reported, he still could have gone and gotten this weapon from a peer-to-peer transaction, right? Because those don't require background checks; they're private sales. So, I'm not calling for the banning of weapons by any way, shape, or form, but at some point, we have to address this, right? And we can claim that it's mental health. We don't have the data that shows, we don't have any data that shows that there's a mental health issue here bigger than anywhere else in the world, yet you're 10 times more likely to be killed with a gun in the United States. So I would like to see us use some of the big data out there, try to find some common sense legislation, and try to find some sort of cure for this.
All right.
Warren, what's your take on it?
It's absolutely a tragedy of its worst sorts. And, the big rush to let's do gun control, let's do this, let's do that. We've moved into a different world altogether. And that world is that I think what we're going to have to really sit down and address is that these different groups are going to have to be responsible for their own security. It's one of the things that Ron Paul said over and over and over. Instead of having the Transportation Safety Administration aggravating the hell out of every passenger, used to be the airlines were responsible for their own security, and it worked pretty well. And so I think that churches, concerts, all of this kind of such stuff are going to have to admit, or at least look at the fact that they're going to have to be responsible for their own security. There was a guy called in yesterday to WWL radio in New Orleans where I was, and he was with the Nation of Islam and in their mosque. And he says, what we do is everybody who shows up there is scanned for drugs and guns and alcohol, and they are not permitted into the service. And he said, we don't have any problems. And, these kind of things. I listened to the radio coming in here, and we're talking about French immersion. What we really need to be stressing in this day and time is let's stress some Spanish, let's stress some Chinese language, and let's stress some Arabic. Because, look, if we had more and more people out there who understood some other languages, and when you hear somebody at the next table, he was talking about his daughters in the back seat were using code, then guess what? You might uncover a lot more things than you do. And I know as having been, had a little working knowledge of a foreign language at one time, it was always kind of nice to be somewhere and you were listening to people talking about you or talking about Americans and not knowing you understood what they were saying.
All right. Thank you.
Well, what more can be said about this horrible tragedy? But the Air Force dropped the ball. And as it turns out, the Air Force's failure to report that shooter is a systemic problem, apparently. There has been an investigation done. The Criminal Investigations Unit, according to a 2015 Pentagon analysis, this just came over the news, 2015 Department of Defense Inspector General analysis looked at all this stuff in the Navy, Air Force, and Marines, and they failed to send criminal history or fingerprint data to the FBI in about 30% of the cases. And this guy was screaming out for being reported. I mean, look at the history of this guy, including abusing animals. I mean, it's really tragic. And I think before we knee-jerk any kind of restraint on our Second Amendment rights, I think I would look very carefully at these issues. I think Trump was on to something about the mental health issues for sure, and especially in this case with this man. So I think that the Air Force definitely dropped the ball. He was dishonorably discharged. He was court-martialed. Was anybody paying? Look, right here in Lafayette, where this Corporal Middlebrook, Ian Howard, and look how many times the police had been called on him, but nobody, they wanted to be nice. They didn't want to file charges. They didn't want to cause him any trouble. And look what happened. He obviously needed help and might have been a cry for help. So I think we need to look at all aspects of this. And in terms of the bump stock and the automatic weapons and semi-automatic weapons, well, I think the NRA is also interested and came out very quickly after the Las Vegas shooting and said, let's really examine these things and see if we do want to look at the availability of bump stocks and those kinds of things. It's such a complex issue, and in fact, we owe a debt of gratitude to the NRA because the gentleman who took down this man had been an instructor and probably would not have been able to find that sweet spot under the vest.
All right, Stafford, real quick, 30 seconds.
I'd like to point out that the majority of Americans and the majority of NRA members that have been polled have come out and said that we need to provide background checks for peer-to-peer sales. So this isn't anything new, and it would be some type of gun control legislation. So when we say stuff like we shouldn't have any knee-jerk gun control legislation, this is a very small thing that could be done.
The key word is knee-jerk. I think we should study all these things very carefully before we mess with our Second Amendment rights.
You do know that we're barred by law to not do studies on gun crimes, right?
I believe the NRA is quite capable and has done.
We're barred by law from tracking gun-related crimes.
I don't believe that. The law enforcement people do that all the time.
Yeah, the FBI has.
Where you get
guys, here's what I'll do. I'll pull my data for you.
Yeah, please, because I'm just interested. Good. Okay, and as we're wrapping up here, because we've got to wrap up this topic, I do want to let you know, and then we got to take a break and move on to our next topic. I love when you brought up the immersion. I knew there were these two, but I didn't know where they were.
Yeah.
You were so on it, Warren, because
of course
you were. I love you. You're so cute. Yes, Chinese immersion is available at Plantation.
Prairie.
It's
a Plantation or Prairie?
It says Plantation Elementary.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then Spanish is available at Alice Boucher. So it's people are thinking the way you're thinking.
There's several French immersion schools.
Yes, ma'am.
So
one thing I want to say about the shooter deal too is the fact that it is absolutely a travesty that guy fractured the skull of his toddler nephew, stepson or whatever, and he was only given 1 year in confinement.
I know.
And a bad conduct discharge. That is a travesty.
It is.
When you got people locked up for a year for not having a driver's license or for running two stop signs or whatever, that bastard should have been locked up for 20 years.
Amen.
Now, one thing that has happened is they are doing studies on the relation, like they say domestic violence is like the canary in the coal mine for these types of mass shootings.
And we've had a change. It's become there was such a push for it in the 80s and 90s, and now I don't know if it's less attention. We need to put that focus back on. We do. All right, guys, we got a break. We got a break here, and we'll come back with our topic. I think we're talking taxes next that are on the ballot. We've got early voting right now, so we'll talk about the 2 renewals and the 1 rededication, Lafayette Parish. That's all on the way. Winging It Wednesday continues now. Our panelists, Stafford Barnett joining us in studio, Warren Cottle also joining us, of course, and Carol Ross. Winging It Wednesday every Wednesday, brought to you by Service Cadillac. Yes, you can still buy Rob's car. What do? You just go by Service Chevrolet, 1212 Ambassador Caffrey. Whether it is pre-owned or whether it's brand new that you're looking for, ton of selection over at Service Cadillac, and so you can check it out right there on Ambassador Caffrey. And don't forget, the wash is right next door. You can clean up your car on this Wash It Up Wednesday. Make it look great by getting it all sparkly and happy and clean. And I don't know, when my car is clean, I just feel better. So I got to go to the wash today. I got to put that on my list.
Absolutely. It looks a little gloomy, but
It does, but I don't care.
Yeah. Well, the thing about
washing for a little while.
That's right.
Yeah, the thing about washing your car when the sun's not out, you don't get all those water spots from it drying up so quickly.
You know, I like you, Derek.
Wow.
I like him a lot.
There's a silver lining there.
There's always a silver lining.
Sunny side.
All right, so let's get to fighting. I mean, let's get to talking too.
So, yeah, our second topic is something that should be on the minds of Lafayette Parish residents, Lafayette City residents, is the tax issues that are coming up as far as the November 18th election goes. There's two tax issues that are being reintroduced to the public, if you will, from the April election. Those two did not pass. Those are renewals for the sheriff's office, jail, and the courthouse. We'll see how that goes as far as if the voters want to vote again to approve those. And the third, probably most contentious issue is a rededication of 1.1 mills from an existing 3.56 mil property tax, rededicating drainage and some money going into the CREATE initiative, which is a culture and tourism initiative. As far as that goes, what are we expecting here in Lafayette Parish? Warren, let's start with you.
I don't know what we're expecting. I know one thing is going to be a fairly low turnout, I understand, and people are complaining about that. And my point is, I really don't care what the percentage turnout is as long as people are casting votes that are well thought out and that, they're just not going out there and just voting just for the hell of it. Quality, or they're not voting because somebody gave them a piece of paper that says vote this way.
Right, it's quality versus quantity.
Or that somebody gave them a piece of paper with a $10 bill on it and said we're going to come back with a 20 if this votes the way that we want you to vote, and those kind of things.
That's never happened, though, I don't believe.
Of course not, especially in Louisiana.
Right.
And, there's a couple of things here. One is that the thing about the jail and the courthouse and all that, things are so convoluted here in Louisiana in some ways that they set by state law some of these things that the courthouse can charge and whatever. They set rates and all that, I do believe. And a lot of that stuff needs to change, because that if you're just going to depend on a millage, and that if the economy moves one way or another, then you can't make it up. They should be allowed to raise the fees that they do in the courthouse and some of that stuff to pay their way. The jails, they need less people in the jails. I've said that over and over and over again. It's kind of like you don't have room for these violent criminals, but you have room to put people in there for possession of, one joint or whatever, and those kind of things. But let's get a little bit to drainage. Let's go back and say for the last 12 years, wasn't the drainage money pulled out of the budget on some places like Youngsville and Doosan by the former mayor-president, Joey Durrell, because he stripped it out of there when William Theriot and Jared Bellard didn't vote the way he wanted to. So now we had 12 years of, or 11 or 12 years of overgrowth in those coulees and such stuff that was there for drainage, and now those areas have flooded. You think there's a correlation in there somewhere? What we need to do is we need to go for a big picture, which is what Carol has pointed out that the I guess it's the feds or whatever are doing, FEMA. And they to take a comprehensive review of what causes flooding and what we can do to straighten it out.
Carol, what's your take on it?
Well, the items 1 and 2, the first one, courthouse and jail complex, and the second one, security, detention, and correctional facility, I have no problem with those. Those are legitimate renewals. Unfortunately, they got caught up in the school board tax back in April, and they failed. The third one, I'm afraid, may have the same effect on the first two. And the third one is, quote unquote, a rededication. I would remind everyone that this so-called rededication, the language in this ballot proposition is just as unclear as the language in the school board proposition. Providing, establishing, operating, improving, expanding public facilities. We support many public facilities for the arts already, and I am very much, I have no problem with that. But this subterfuge, this is a very cynical thing, combining all these things and titling it public health. That's what you're going to see as the title of this, the public health, which we rededicated 2 years ago, and we still haven't seen the results of that rededication. And here we come back. Now we're going to throw in some drainage because everybody's upset about drainage. We're going to call it a drainage rededication, and we're going to throw in this thing called CREATE, which is just the camel's nose under the tent. They're already doing CREATE, have been for well over a year, have spent a lot of money on it, including that study, that incredible study that was done, I think it was back in October, and they still have, I believe Entertainment on books in some kind of contractual way, and LPTFA put up $25,000 for that study, LEDA and LCVC put up $15K each, and I would say this. If we're very concerned about drainage, we should go back to the drawing board and actually really focus our attention on the issue of drainage, not muddy the waters with this particular thing. And by the way, they said all along they've been collecting too much money in this particular millage, and yet we have 4 councilmen looking at supposedly all the millages. So I think we should take a step back. We have a regional situation going on with FEMA, et.cetera. I think this thing needs to go down.
Stafford, drainage is something that is close to your heart and home, apparently. Yeah. Touch on what you think about, this drainage issue being tied in with CREATE and as far as the other millages go as well.
So my house flooded in August, out of the house for 8 months. About a month before my house flooded, I was laid off. So I spent all my time trying to get my house rebuilt, trying to find a job. I was a victim of the oil field. And it was a pretty tough time, and I'm thankful for a loving family who were able to take me in, and my wife who, this was a very high stress situation, who stuck by my side, and we powered through it, and we've come out better for it. So Carol just said something interesting. She said that we've got some villages that are overfunded. I believe in democracy, right, and I believe in dedicating taxes. And one of those that is overfunded is the parish library system, right? And one of the things that makes me proud to be an American every day is the fact that there's more libraries in the United States than there are McDonald's. And I think that that's important as a society when we say, hey, we're gonna take that money and put our money where our mouth is and give access to information to people who typically can't afford it. That being said, the voters of Lafayette decided where that money went. They decided when they dedicated the tax. So a couple of years ago, we were able to take the animal shelter and put it into the mosquito fund, right? And the voters of Lafayette decided to do that. And the fund has swelled, right? We were able to renegotiate contracts, get our costs down. And I can tell you, I live in a home that's in a 500-year flood zone. And if you go and you sit down with my neighbors, the flooding has never been this close, right? And it took us for a surprise. I mean, it's very tough. I had 4 inches of water in my garage, right, on Thursday for a weather forecast. I'm sorry, I think it was Wednesday. I left the station last Wednesday, and somebody goes, "Hey, be careful out there. It's going to rain." And never, "Hey, it's flash flooding," and that kind of stuff. So look, the CREATE initiative, $500,000. We know that there's probably about a 7-to-1 return on that. It's very little money taken out of that, and it's something that people could have gone to the council when they put this on there and said, hey, we don't want this, but we didn't, right? And now that it's here, we've got people attacking this, giving out bad information on a regular basis, get people who don't live in the parish, and who aren't affected by this. I don't think anybody else in this room flooded, right? And know this, whether you like it or not, when you come out and you say you don't support this, you're supporting more flooding. There's 1,000 families who
that is not true.
There are 1,000 families who are displaced for this, who emptied their 401ks, who emptied their savings, who sold everything they had to try to get back into their homes. If they go through this again, they're gone. They're leaving Lafayette, period.
No one supports anyone flooding, and I'm sorry for your losses, Stafford, but I believe that government has a responsibility to focus on the drainage and on the flood issue and not throw in things like CREATE. If they were serious about drainage, they would not have muddied the waters by putting this in there. And frankly, we need to right-size all of the millages. We support libraries. I think the libraries are great. I supported the tax. When Gail Smith went around and put it in, we supported it. There are 3 library millages right now. One of them is producing an unencumbered amount. They have in their reserve fund $25 million to taking out the $14.5 million that they're going to be spending on building the last of the libraries that they promised, the Scott. So I think we should give those council members time, and we should get people involved in looking at right-sizing the millages, not government warehousing our money in these big reserve funds that they have, but finding out what's the right size for the millages and putting the appropriate amount of money to drainage, which is a basic function of government, as CREATE is not.
All right, we didn't have time. All right. Oh, wait.
You have one call coming in.
I'm sorry about that. All right, caller, you're up on the line. Go ahead with your comment, please.
My comment is I watched the council meeting when they were talking about this CREATE thing, and every council member, none of them flooded. Maybe they had some people in their families or friends. None of them flooded, and the only one that was against the CREATE was the Youngsville councilman, and he got shut down like almost immediately. So I'm against this. I think every penny of that rededication should go to drainage, because that is so important for everybody in Lafayette, because streets, houses, yards, everything has been flooding, and it needs to be addressed. And taking money away from this, I mean, I'm fine with the arts, but wait till a later date and bring it up in a few years when we get flooding more under control.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment, Stafford.
Carol, when you say stuff that we should right-size millages, what you're saying is that a democratically elected...
Do not interpret what I'm saying.
I can interpret what you're saying.
Wrong.
I can interpret what you're saying.
You get it mostly wrong.
What you're saying is open for interpretation, period. Okay? When you say stuff like that, you're saying that the voters of Lafayette got it wrong. Okay? And I'm telling you, I don't agree with you. It's democracy.
What I am telling you is the voters don't anticipate...
I don't question...
Do not impute to me things that I did not say.
I
am saying this.
Period. You
I
didn't.
am saying this. That
you
when
don't know what it's like to lose sleep at
villages,
night over the flooding.
As I did.
You don't know what it's like to go cut sheetrock out of your own home.
Well, you can keep screaming all you want. I am telling you this one thing. When voters vote for these things, they don't anticipate the natural increase that is going to come about.
There is no increase.
First of all, from the... Excuse me.
There's no increase.
Listen to me. Not in the millage itself, but in what is collected, and that is what increases.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Over
property
the years.
values went up.
Property
I'm
values
sorry.
went up.
The overall value of our economy went up.
Online, and the valuation that is done every 4 years.
This is the type of bad information that gets put on a regular basis.
This is a fact.
And what's being
Stafford,
said is that
whether you like it or not, it's a fact. We are collecting a lot of money
over X amount of years. We got double the amount of money come in. Guess what?
3.
Taxes didn't go up. What happened is our property values went up.
That is right. So when
your
elected leaders come back to you and say, well, our costs have gone up over the years, and
our
I say
elected
to you,
representatives.
When I say to you, when your costs have gone up over the years, and so have your collections.
Okay.
What did you do with the money?
Okay, let's bring some common sense to this argument.
Go ahead,
Let's go back to what I've said over and over and over. I'm going to agree with Stafford that the people have voted and that we have elected representatives there, and that sometimes the voters do make bad decisions. Sometimes the voters are wrong. Sometimes our elected officials are wrong. And one of those times is, let's go back. I'm sorry that you flooded, but let's go back to this deal that I keep coming up with over and over and over, which is the FEMA map and whether or not you have to have flood insurance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have a mortgage. If you don't have a mortgage on your home, you know, then you're not required to have flood insurance.
I had flood insurance, and I
don't care. I'm just not. This is what I'm talking about. Okay. How many people
I just don't understand how it's a good argument.
Would you hold on just a minute? Let me talk. How many people that came up over these last couple of floods that they did not have flood insurance? That was a big deal. They did not have flood insurance because they were not technically in a flood zone. And the reason they weren't in a flood zone is because those people you're talking about showed up in mass at these meetings and screamed and hollered about that FEMA map putting them in a flood zone, and they said, Youngsville has never flooded. This area out here has never Doosan. I live over in Scott and Doosan. That area has never flooded.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those areas that never flooded, guess what? They flooded. And there were so many of those people, hundreds of them did not have flood insurance because technically they were not in a flood zone. But if you look at that flood map, the FEMA map, they should have been in a flood zone, which means they would have had flood insurance.
All right, let's go to the phones. 232-1542, 232-1542. Winging It Wednesday on Acadiana's Morning News. All right, caller, you're first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did flood in August of last year.
You flooded.
Had about a foot of water. in my home. I had to dig out 4 feet of sheetrock. I had to replace walls. I had to replace baseboards. Had to replace a lot of possessions. We got help from FEMA because we didn't have flood insurance because it doesn't flood where we live.
Mm-hmm.
We almost had water in the house again on Wednesday of last week.
Mm-hmm.
I have second thoughts about voting for this proposal because I'm concerned how much of this money is going to go to create and how much is actually going to go to drainage.
Well, let me just give you what Joel Robideau was with us Friday. He said 90% of the money is for drainage, 10% is for create. So I'm throwing that in there of what he said.
And the numbers are out there.
May I point one thing out?
Well, so let's make sure he's done. Caller, are you done?
Yeah, I haven't read any of the ballot proposal, but is there any verbiage in there that allows them to change those percentages, or is that 90% here, 10% there, locked in stone?
No.
Okay.
So the millages are very specific about how many millages are taken from one fund and put to the other, and how many millages go wherever else. And let's be clear about the courthouse and the jail tax, right? Those courthouses, that number represents $53 in property tax for every $200,000 of the value of your home. So if people say, hey, the taxes are too expensive, if you're willing to, so let's take a step back as well. Those are legally required by the state to be funded, period, right?
Yeah, so one way or another.
That is correct. And that is why I support those.
So here's what's going to end up happening if we don't pass those two and we pass the drainage tax. The biggest problem with drainage is in the unincorporated parts of the parish, right? And that money is a separate budget line item from the rest of the city budget. There's two crews who do drainage work. There's one for the parish, and there's one for the city, right? The parish one typically doesn't work in the city too much. The city one typically doesn't work in the parish too much. Sometimes they work together, right? So if we don't fund this, the money that's going to get stripped is from the unincorporated parts of the parish, period. Okay?
Okay, Carol,
all right.
You had a quick comeback.
Real quick, for the gentleman who hasn't read the proposition and thinks that it may be specific, it is not specific.
Okay.
For the purpose of providing, establishing, operating, improving, and expanding public facilities and programs to foster and enhance parishes' culture, recreation, and entertainment. That is about as imprecise as the language on the school board tax.
It very precisely says it's going to create.
By the way, when there was a challenge to that waste transfer station, where did they take the money from? From this fund.
Hey, it was wrong. It was wrong then. It was wrong then. That was the wrong thing to do.
And there is nothing to guarantee that it won't happen again.
All right, back to the phone lines.
All past is prologue, Stafford.
Right. Caller, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. I'm one of those that flooded in August, too, and I'm still working on my house, okay? Like Miss Carol said, when they're going to have something else come up that, they were approved, somebody was approved for something, and all of a sudden they decide, oh, no, you can't do this, and they have to bail it out because they sued the city for something, and they're going to take it out of that fund, that's where we get stuck again. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Warren, and then we'll have to go to our next call.
One quick thing is that where I live, I am in a flood zone, but the new FEMA map actually takes my house out of a flood zone.
And I was just the opposite. I know what you're talking about.
Right.
Because I was not in a flood zone.
My point is, when I look around there at the flooding and at the drainage and such stuff, and I see what the Lafayette Consolidated Government has said about it, is they're exactly backwards. I mean, we need to take a real adult look at this thing. And just like, has anybody on the council put forth any kind of resolution that says they can no longer take money out of one of these funds, like the mosquito drainage fund, to pay for a lawsuit that eventually got thrown out of court?
For all intents and purposes, it wasn't legal the first time. Okay, so that's
I've said that point.
They got a federal judge
to sign off on it. They got a judge to say it was.
They found a way to get it out. And listen, I don't agree with them doing that. Okay,
yeah,
period.
But they can do it again.
I think that it's wrong. What I'm telling you is that if you think the solution to fixing drainage in Lafayette is not funding it or not getting
the hell you come up with that?
Not getting a third crew out there or a fourth crew. That's insanity.
Let me bring up Broussard.
It's insanity, the things you're saying.
Yes, really.
About not funding it, not having the crews. That's it. My point is,
I'm sure it's easy to have a perspective when it hasn't touched you personally.
well, let me tell you something. It came within about an inch of touching me personally.
And I'm thankful your house didn't flood.
That's right, and me too. But what I am telling you is that when you sit there and you let these things build up and build up and build up, and you ignore
wait. You're saying the flooding issue is built up? Because I'll tell you, something changed 2 years ago. 3 years ago, my house experienced 250-year floods, 250-year rains in the 75. Never got close. And I don't know what the answer is. I've said this repeatedly.
Well, that's right. You don't know what the answer is.
Exactly.
This is my point.
You're right.
Let's sit there and take a look at it, and then let's try to develop a plan that is the answer to it.
You're going to stare at a freight line coming on the tracks all day long. Are you going to get off the tracks?
Let me say something.
I'm going to get off the tracks. That's what I'm trying to say about this thing. We need to get off the tracks. We need to be working on it. I come from another area in this country where there was a lot of flooding on farmlands and residential areas and all that. And what they did was what Carol's talking about they're trying to do here. They went in there and developed a plan where they built these reservoir lakes to catch water, and they dredged out the rivers and tributaries and all that stuff, and the flooding has just about gone to zero.
Well, I think
so they spent money on it.
I think one thing that the
nobody is opposed to spending money on it. That's what you keep coming up.
Opposed to funding it.
Okay, we can continue with the topic, but we do have to take a break. Thank you, panelists. And caller, just stand by. We'll get to you when we come back. It is 7:42. Mostly cloudy for today, a 30% chance of showers. A high temperature only at 67, and that's where we're at right now. Mostly cloudy, showers tonight, a 60% chance of rain for tonight, low at 50. All right, now as far as your traffic goes, North University at I-10, there's a stalled vehicle. We have a traffic crash, I-49 southbound at mile marker 3 in Carencro. That's I-49 southbound, mile marker 3 in Carencro. So watch out in that area this morning as well. And we continue on Winging It Wednesday with our discussion about the 2 tax renewals and the third item, which is the rededication. All right, this person has been waiting patiently. All right, caller, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so first thing, bottom line, Stafford just basically legitimized everything that I was going to say when he said it was illegal when they took the money the first time. Well, guess what? What's going to stop them from doing it again? It's not that we're against flooding. For flooding. But the bottom line is we do not trust these officials and politicians to do what's right.
When you vote no against a tax, think about your neighbors.
Okay, thank you. All right, next caller. All right, we're back on the phone lines. Okay, you're up next. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a little bit different angle to look at this problem. I know exactly who has all the money to pay for the drainage and who has all the earth-moving equipment to take care of it. And that's the developers. 20 years ago, we never heard of these 500-year floods and 100-year floods and all these problems that we're having right now. We flood every now and then. I remember back in the 80s, we flooded in Broussard. But now we're flooding like every couple of months. And like one of your
panelists,
your people there, I forget his name, but he was talking about he flooded. I feel sorry for you. But where's all the money coming from the developers? They're the ones causing these problems by building all the neighborhoods around here without putting the proper drainage in. Are we requiring them to put proper drainage in?
Yeah, yes, we are requiring to put proper drainage in. We're also requiring them to build retention ponds and to plane their neighborhoods at certain angles.
Okay, thank you.
The UDC covers that.
And
also available to the public.
Yes.
One question. Define proper drainage.
Well, and that's an excellent point, too, because,
it is a regional issue.
If you want to bring in a civil engineer, I'm sure that we could bring somebody in.
It has to be approached regionally.
And it is being approached regionally. We've got a group, the Watershed Group,
but
has gotten together with federal funds to look at it.
This is a bad knee-jerk reaction, and this is a terrible proposition, and it really should be voted down and come back with something serious.
Funding to drainage without raising taxes, and you're calling it terrible.
They don't have to raise taxes. They already have money in the budget for drainage.
Okay, so what you're talking about is 2 separate budgets, okay? And let's get that clarified because we always share half the story and don't tell the whole one, okay?
We do, Stafford. We always tell half the story. I think there are some people who tell half the story.
There are 2 separate crews, and there are 2 separate fundings of revenue.
We have never combined the revenue for the city and the parish. We do not have consolidated government.
I agree with you.
How is that our fault?
No, but at the same time, if we have an opportunity to get money to the areas that are flooding, that could be fixed
Did you
with
hear what
putting
the lady
money into
said?
it.
We don't trust them
I
to
understand
do
that
the
she doesn't
right
trust them,
thing
but y'all
with the
build
money.
this culture of lack
First
of
of all,
trust by shooting down everything.
We didn't build that culture. They
Whoa,
earned that
wait.
culture.
You have 2 hours every day
They
on the radio
earned
where
that
you
culture.
tear down anybody who's trying to do anything positive in this community.
I have 2 hours to tear down anything. I get the facts to the people.
All right, Warren, you're next.
That is totally offensive, I think, to everybody, is to sit there and say that the people who are opposed to anything or tearing down whatever. You know, you just got through talking about hold on. You just got through talking about it's a democracy and people get to vote and blah, 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 which I agree with. And the point is, I'm not against spending money on drainage. I'm not against spending money on any of that stuff. But what I'm opposed to is going out there and taxing people and then turning around and squandering the money and putting it somewhere where it's doing no good. And I'm also opposed to things like where you go in there and raid $4.5 million from the fund that you really need to have the money in there, and you don't do it. You know, but your drainage problem here starts where? In Vermilion Parish. When's the last time they dredged the Vermilion River? When's the last time they tried to do any of that stuff?
Let's talk about physics.
What I'm saying is you need to sit there and take
physics. Dredging the Vermilion will do nothing. The Vermilion, in its current state, is a bayou. It is not a river. It only becomes a river when we flood.
Okay.
If you dredge the Vermilion, all you do is increase the carrying capacity at its lowest point.
Okay.
It does not increase its ability to flow
water.
water.
Now if you want to talk about physics and all that, then let's do that. Water is going to back up from its base of its biggest restriction. Do you agree with that?
I do.
Where's your biggest restriction?
Vermilion.
I do not know.
Okay, you don't know.
I think the coolies have some issues.
Okay, then why don't we go out there and look at those places where there are the restrictions, and then let's start going back from there.
You don't think that we do that? Look, here's the deal. I will tell you again. We've got 2 crews to handle flooding for the whole parish.
Where have you been living?
I mean, where have I been living?
You need to go out there. Just go out there and take a look at some of that stuff. Come with me. I'll show you where the things are dammed up.
You can come to my house right now and see the water lines in my garage if that's what you want to do.
I don't want to do that.
I understand that you want to do that. Y'all want to vilify not raising taxes and funding a problem. First it was you didn't like it because it was creative, and now you just don't like it because I support it.
Okay,
right?
hold on. No, I would really appreciate it if you wouldn't tell me what I vilify and all that about raising taxes. I'm telling you that what they have done is neglected
You're right.
these areas where the drainage needs to be.
There's not enough money for it.
Okay.
Well, we do have some callers
They've been
waiting
patiently. Okay, your next caller. Go ahead.
Yeah, my house did flood in 2016. So did my neighbors, and so did my brothers. The parish came out there after the fact and cleaned out the coulee. The amount of sediment they pulled out was approximately equal to the amount of water that I had in my house and my neighbors.
Wow.
If they had kept up that coulee in the first place,
bingo,
neither myself nor my brother would have flooded.
Yeah.
I want to see a millage dedicated 100% toward improving drainage in the parish. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. So, philosophically, for some people, that is a problem, and that's what that gentleman was saying. We have time for one more call, then we're going to have to start wrapping it up, guys, because we're just running out of time this morning. All right, you're next on the show. Go ahead, please.
Yes, just a quick comment. If the gentleman would put the effort Carol puts into her show for 2 hours a day, it might, and listen to the constituents, something might happen. This is ridiculous. He sits here, and somebody has to show his poker hand. They put the bet up, and what does he do? He jumps down Carol's throat. That is bull.
Okay, thank you for your comment. All right.
Now, I think one thing we can all agree on is the fact that the voters need to do the research, read the ballot proposals, make the decision for yourself, and head out to the polls.
That's right.
Everybody needs to get out and vote.
Okay, final caller. Go ahead, please.
Having this Stafford guy on your show makes it very hard to listen to.
Well, but I know you're listening and you called, so, I mean, you know.
Good point.
There's nothing wrong with good discussion. Nothing wrong with good discussion. Okay, guys, listen, seriously, thank you for the discussion. We are going to tackle it again next week because early voting is going on right now, which ends Saturday. No early voting on Friday because it's a state holiday. But then, of course, next week we'll be heading into the actual election day, which will be the 18th of November. Stafford Barnett, Warren Cottle, Carol Ross, thank y'all for your time this morning.
Have a great Wednesday. Thank y'all.
Y'all too. All right, coming up now on 7:54 here at KPEL.